having this conference down in Sydney. Are you guys familiar with NDC sort of before this was here? Like, did you see it here and you're like, got to go to that? Yeah, awesome. It's just really fantastic to see such world-class conferences and world-class speakers coming into Australia. So awesome to whoever's running it. My name's Jordan Knight, and I'm a technical evangelist with Microsoft here in Australia. And I'm going to talk to you guys today about perhaps one of the more interesting topics in computer and software development, and that's, of course, authentication. So you guys are really excited by authentication? Or scared by it? Scared of it? Excited by it? Yeah, authentication. We should all hang out. Like we. You guys are weird. I don't really like it. Like, it's one of those things that you sort of get to know because you have to get to know it. But it's difficult. It's hard to know if you're doing authentication right. It's just one of those things where you got to sort of try and tuck it away at the start of a project, and that's it. It's done, and everything like that. So. Today, I'm actually not going to show you guys any radical new technologies or some sort of hot new authentication system that you guys need to hear about that's coming out next week. Or I'm not going to show you guys some, wicked custom authentication system that we built from the ground up and over-engineered and, you guys should totally check out. What I'm going to do is actually take pretty much off-the-shelf authentication pieces that you may or may not have seen, but at least most of them will be familiar to you, and go ahead and package them up in an elegant way and I guess turn them into a usable product that you and your team can go and consume later on. So it's, I guess, bringing in some elegance to that authentication piece. Being in charge of setting up new projects, and I'm thinking if you guys are here to learn about authentication, you must be involved at least at the front end of it, because it's not something you usually add at the end, right? And so it's a very important job because you guys are setting it up, in your role as software dev leads and architects and things like that. I like to think of it that you guys are actually producing a product for your internal developers, and then they'll go and use that product to go and deliver the actual software to market. And by product, I mean it can be a really good architecture or good base class libraries, a nice setup, some DevOps, things like that. All those pieces that you do. So then the actual devs on the project don't have to worry about any of that, and they can get on with the job of actually writing productive code. And so in many ways, you could almost call it framework engineering. You're building frameworks for people. You're setting up frameworks for other people to use. And so what I like to do in talks like this is to take a fairly advanced concept and break it down, and then the end result will be an artifact or something that we would be able to show in a talk that's at a far less level than this. So we're going to take something really complex and make it really simple. So at the end, the last sort of 1 minute of the talk, I'm going to say, and here's what we did. And if it works, you can all go, yeah, it worked. And if it doesn't, you can all just leave. It's fine. I'm going to demo a lot today on ASP.NET Core as well. So there's two main components I'm going to be demonstrating. We'll get to that in a minute. And so let's get into it. Man, that's a slow animation. So if you've ever set up a Greenfields project and you've gone off and done that first little search for authentication, punch that into Google or Bing or whatever it is you guys use, you'll note that the stuff that comes back, the sheer volume of content that comes back about authentication and what you should be doing and the different ways to think about it and all that sort of stuff is huge. It's really, really hard to know what you should actually be doing. It's near on impossible to sort of figure out, what's the best way, and what was the best way yesterday might not even be the best way today. So the other problem that we've got these days is that modern systems don't just sort of sit in one area. They span platforms, they span different workloads. Most systems that you build are going to have a mobile app, they're going to have an API, they're going to have management, I guess, some sort of website that you can go and edit in or something like that. So there's all these different types of workloads and products that you need to be able to make your authentication system work in. And it may not actually be straightforward to go and do something like that. And so, back to that net search. And I think this, it turns out a lot of different stuff. And I think you can roughly group them into 3 primary categories. You've got the stuff you write yourself. You've got the stuff that's half done in the middle there. And then you've got the stuff that where you do nothing. It's fully third-party software as a service style authentication. And I mean, they've each got their benefits. You could use whichever one depending on your needs. So with first party, basically you think of it as like storing the username and password yourself. So you've got lots of control, you've got lots of room and flexibility to customize, but there's also room for mistakes and errors, and if something does go wrong, then it's on you. So to that end, you've got to spend extra time securing the systems. You've got to basically, it's going to cost a little bit more in software development, I guess. The second category is basically a platform of some kind where they actually just do the authentication piece for you, but then you go off and sort of manage the rest of it. So it's like a little, it's a hybrid solution in many ways. So they're storing the passwords and they're managing actual authentication, but you've still got a lot of control over the code. But you do lose control over the actual authentication piece, which may or may not be good. And the third kind is the fully managed products, so Xamarin, Auth0, things like that. It's basically another API that you install in your product, and then off you go and treat it as such. Those systems you can get off the ground up and running really, really quickly, but unfortunately they might be expensive. So if you've got a decent amount of users, even just sort of 20 to 50,000 users, you're going to find that those products can get quite expensive pretty quickly. And as I said, they've all got their pros and cons, and depending on what it is you're doing, you could recommend any of those solutions. It's sort of, you don't just say, oh, this one's definitely the best for every given scenario. So, but I'm more telling you guys like there's heaps of choice out there because I want to put emphasis on the fact that your actual product, the code that you're writing as part of your product, shouldn't actually have any concept of authentication. Once you're down and actually doing the workloads that you guys are actually trying to produce and sell, that code should have no concept of authentication. It should be a completely separate piece. So it shouldn't matter to your local code or the code that your devs are working on how the authentication happens. They should be able to just get a user ID or something like that. So separating out the authentication away from the main product, I think, is a really, really important piece for maintainability and for upgradability in the future, as well as simplifying things for end developers or end user developers. And in fact, I'd go so far to say is that you could actually take authentication out and treat it as an entirely separate product that's run potentially by another team. And then you consume that in your own organisation as if it was a third-party product that someone else owned. Man, those animations. And so we've done a few projects over the years. Before I worked at Microsoft, I used to run a software company, and we've built all sorts of things and ran into authentication on many occasions. Because we were doing bespoke software development, we had opportunity to do greenfields a number of times, so we got to sort of start over fresh each time and apply previous learnings without having incumbencies of having to support it and things, support an older version of the product. And so in the last few that we did, we actually decided to try the central authentication mechanism and separate it out. And so the real code would really only be the real code, the non-authentication piece you're actually writing, the API or whatever, would actually only really be worried about authorization. And even then, we make that super easy as well. So in one of our products, we had an API, which was quite scalable because it was handling the mobile apps. We had the mobile apps themselves that we need to be able to authenticate easily, as well as the management websites and everything like that. And we made it so then each of those products, we could actually very easily say, yeah, let's add a new product that's got authentication, because we didn't have to sort of worry about, because it was separated out, we didn't have to worry about how that was going to work. We could just know that it would work. So there wasn't like this discussion, how are we going to authenticate? And so, yeah, I mean, at this, in most of this session's code, I'm just getting through the background story here a little bit. The first part, I'm just going to quickly run you through the central authentication site. And there's no rocket science in there. It really is just a very simple website. I'm just going to show you it to set the context. But then the sort of back half of the presentation, I'm going to show you how we consume that and take it into a real ASP.NET Web API and actually start using it in a real product. There's a link on the bottom of every slide here for the code. Everything that I'm going to show you today is all up on GitHub these days. And so the deal is that the central authentication site goes and gets an ID token from Azure B2C. Now I'm just using Azure B2C because it's new, it's not quite out yet, and I thought I'd try it out. But it could be any third-party authentication, it could be Office 365 or Facebook or anything like that. We then go and get the token from there, and we actually transform it into our own token. So much like I think a lot of things in software development, you shouldn't depend on an external dependency like an entity or something from an external system. You should, as quickly as possible, bring that entity into your own code. So you might do some mapping, at least you have control over it. So if they change the entity later, you can still just fix this one little piece instead of having to fix a whole lot of stuff around the system. And that goes, I think, for assets that come out of other systems, including security tokens. So in this case, we actually then map the claims through, and it pretty much just ends up looking like the same token, except we've generated it. The beauty being is that if we decide to go away from B2C, which is business to consumer in Azure, we can quickly pick that up and we're still generating the same tokens. We can also generate our own tokens whenever we want. So we can generate test tokens and all sorts of other stuff. So by having that dependency shifted into our code, we're freeing ourselves up to do a lot of stuff. Yeah, we could easily switch out B2C for Office 365 and Azure Active Directory and all those other systems, Xamarin or Auth0, whatever. Or we could run them side by side. Okay, demo. This is going to be interesting because it's going to change resolution. It might explode everything. If I can find the mouse. There we are. Hey, beautiful. So, yeah. So we've got this, I'm just going to go into here. We've got this central authentication host, and I've actually deployed it up to Azure. This is a .NET Core site, and it's immediately redirected me. I've hit the home page, it's detected I'm not logged in, and it's redirected me off to Azure B2C. Now, Azure B2C is basically for consumers account management system. So it's like authentication with some identity on top. So I can actually go in there and create a new user and everything like that. I've set up the fields that I want to collect, and Azure will handle the storage of those username and passwords, the reset. You can do two-factor authentication and all that stuff. It's doing it. This talk isn't meant to be about B2C. It's more just demonstrating that I'm going off and I've decided to have something external handle my actual username and password for me. I'm going to click cancel and get a 500 error, and then we'll try that again. Beautiful. There's meant to be a web page there in case they click cancel. But I've already got an account, so I'm just going to log in with that. It's one I prepared earlier. And so B2C is a new product. It's not out yet, but it's available. You can try it out. It's pretty cool. It seems to be on the right track, I think. So what I've just got back there is now the central authentication host. It just does one thing. It's just sent back a token that I've generated. And so the token format that we're using is JWT, or Json Web Tokens, which is, they call it JOT, I think. I don't know how that works, but that's what I've heard a few people call it. And basically what these guys are, they've got a header, then a full stop, and then the payload, which is the claims, and then they're finalised by a signature, and the signature is the important part. So I've just copied that token into jwt.io, and that's going to go and decode it. So it's just a base 64 encoded string on the right with some full stops in it. You can see the full stop there. Oops. Can we? Yeah, there we go. You can see the full. you can see the full stop down there, and that's the full stop between the payload and the signature on the end. So the important part is that with Json Web Tokens is that you can put whatever claims in that you want, then they get signed with this signature, and then later on when you've got the right key, you can actually validate that the token hasn't been manipulated. So by putting claims in there and then letting them out of the central auth host into an app, for example, it can go to a non-trusted platform like an app that's in the user's hand, it's outside of your control, and then come back into your system, and you can check the crypto validation on that token, and if it hasn't been modified, then the key will check out, and so you can actually then trust the claims. And one of the claims there is OID, and so that's going to be the user ID when we get into our new system. The actual code behind the central auth host it's up there and available, but pretty much it's centered around a couple of bits and pieces. As I said, it's using ASP.NET Core. So in ASP.NET Core, the way we set up things such as authentication, just about anything to do with the pipeline and the management of the app, is that we use Middleware and the OWIN pipeline. And so what I've actually done is I've added an extension method here that I can call off from my startup, which I'll show you in a minute. And essentially what it's doing is going off to settings, and it's going to configure the built-in OpenID Connect options. So in this case, Azure B2C is based on technology called OpenID Connect, which is basically OAuth 2 with some identity laid on top. The beauty is that ASP.NET Core doesn't actually have any concept of OpenID Connect, of Azure B2C, but because it's compatible, it can go off and we can create a very precise set of configuration, I will say. It did take me a little while to get it right, but once it's going, it's been working really well. And so the reason why I put that in extension method is because there's a fair bit of code here to sort of get it going. It looks a bit messy. And then we switch over to the startup.cs, which is the main configuration spot for ASP.NET Core. And you can see my extension method's being called there. Try and get some zoom on that. And basically, by tucking that away, an extension method made it all nice and neat. And then I'm passing in a configuration setting. So ASP.NET Core's got some really cool new stuff around configuration. I know there's a couple of intro ASP.NET Core talks on in this very conference, so I don't want to go too much into the basics. But essentially, I'm looking for a setting there, and I'm passing it in from the app settings. So if I pop that up for a second, I'm looking for this AD settings thing there, and it's got all the bits and bobs that came out of the B2C configuration in the Azure portal. I would show you that, but it really is just a configuration setup web page. It is very boring. But this is the stuff that it gave me to put in here. And so that's pretty much it. So when I run the guy, I get that token. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's all I want to show you guys on that piece. I just wanted to get through it so we know where this token's coming from and basically what it is. Okay. Cool. So some things to consider. Yes, that was Azure B2C, and it was using customizing the OWIN pipeline with OpenID Connect options. So if you spot another authentication technology that's using OpenID Connect, and I think we'll start seeing more and more of them coming through, then that will work as well. And that the reason why we can trust this token when we take it out is because it's signed. There is one thing with those tokens, though, is that they shouldn't be made public. So you shouldn't ever send them over a non-secure link. If the user loses them, you might need a way to invalidate them if they change their password or something like that. They really will represent the user, so they have to be very secure. Because it's centralised, the authentication system, you can integrate with other systems later if you like. You can have multi-factor authentication. You can multi-tenant it, so you could have one central authentication system set up, and depending on what you pass through on the query string, you could have multiple different products using it. So we actually did that. We added a second product to the family in one of our solutions. We were able to reuse the same auth site with some slightly different settings to be able to go ahead and do that. You can do pretty much whatever you damn well want. Okay, so the main part of the presentation is this how to actually consume this authentication piece. I think token generation and setting up authentication and stuff like that's cool, but I want to show you guys, I think, how I would actually go about setting up a real project to go and use this stuff to tuck it away and make it really neat for users to get in there. When I say users, I mean devs in the team. I like to make things simple enough that a junior dev could come in on the first day and ask a couple of questions about what they should be using and figure out how it works without having to know any of the complexity underneath it. So I've actually filed a new project already, just in the interest of time, web application 2. And the only other thing I've done to this project after creating it just before is I've brought in a function helper that just contains some of the code for this demo. I'll show you guys the code, but I'm not a big fan of copying and pasting huge swathes of code in a demo. So what we've got here is we've got this project, and it's an API, web API site. So we've got a values controller here, and in the past we would just add authorization here. You guys have probably seen that before, the authorize attribute, and that should mean that now I want to go ahead and authorize that particular get operation on that controller. Now, IE is not going to really describe what happens, so let's flip across into Postman, and we'll just run that again. And you can see there that, yes, indeed, I was not authorized, which is interesting because I don't really know how I would be authorized yet, because in ASP.NET Core, there is no actual built-in way to do anything. So out of the box, there's no concept of authentication. There's extension methods you can use to do it, but essentially, when you first set up a new project, there's nothing in there. So it's just detected that there's authorization, and there's no authorization schemes present, so it's just flat out denied it. So we've got to go ahead and actually add in some of those. So we've got this token that we're carting around with us all of a sudden. That token is probably, let's say for argument's sake, it's coming in from a mobile app that's logged into the authentication site. So that this mobile app's gone off to the authentication site and come back, and now it's ready to start talking to the API. But the API sort of probably doesn't really know where it got that token from, or any concept, I guess, of the authentication site. It doesn't even have to talk to it. So again, back in startup.cs, which is in ASP.NET Core, it's a fairly common spot to be working, I guess. There's two main sections. There's configure services, which is basically configuring configs and various other things that the app can use, services the app can use, ready for dependency injection. So ASP.NET Core is completely built around dependency injection, and that's what configure services is for. It's getting things set up, ready to provide options. And then below that is the configure section, and that's where we actually go ahead and set up the middleware that's going to be run as the app flies through its various stages. Down the bottom here, we're going to add some more things. I just want to really call out right now that ordering is important. If you've got add MVC and you want the MVC to be authenticated, you have to put the authentication stuff before it. It's a common mistake that people make. Okay, so we could actually use a built-in Json Web Token authentication extension method. So middleware, my mouse keeps falling down the lectern, sorry. So basically, ASP.NET Core, it's probably a bit small to read, I'll blow it up a bit, is it comes with the capability to go ahead and actually set up a piece of middleware, complete with options including the token's valid issuer, the token's valid audience, as well as keys and things to be able to go and check the signature. So out of the box, you can actually do this really easily. And, you know, in certain circumstances, that might be good enough. So actually this code that I've got in this gist here will actually probably be enough to go ahead and say, yes, this user's real. and yes, this user is authenticated against the system. But it does come with other problems. Firstly, it leaves the question of how to actually get access to that in your code. So just because the token's good and the user's been given access to it, you haven't actually really authorised anything. And even if you check a claim in the token to make sure that the particular claim is valid and that suits your requirements, you haven't really authorised them. You haven't really actually gone off and done any database operations or actually set up the current request to be the identity of that user. So it sort of leaves all that sort of stuff for begging. The other problem that it's got is that if I want to change the way that we validate tokens, so my boss has just come to me and said, we need to be able to cancel them. We need to be able to have the tokens need to have an ID, which they do. We need to be able to register that ID somewhere and then have it cancelable. Now, if I've got 4 websites and product sites and things like that, that's actually a non-trivial task to go and change this piece of code everywhere. So what I want to do is offload that onto another system as well. So I think we need to customise a little bit more for this particular scenario. But I just wanted to really point out that there is a really, really straightforward way to validating tokens. So when I actually first started preparing this talk a while ago, I went in there and I saw the use JWT bearer authentication, and I started writing my own class based on it. So I was subclassing off it and overriding things. But then I was looking through the source code, and this is what's so great about things that are developed in the open. So what I've got here is the source code off GitHub for ASP.NET security. And so I was looking through for some stuff, and I just stumbled across a way to actually intercept the JWT token processing and run my own code instead. So, and this is one of the great things about having stuff developed out in the open. I don't think so. Yeah, say yes. So what I actually did is I was just looking through, and I've just punched in the JWT stuff there, and I found basically the local spot here where I think it's going to be doing stuff. And I was just reading through, and I've become fairly familiar with the code, I guess you could say, but then I came across this little piece here. And what it's saying is, when there's been a new token message received into the pipeline, if there's this particular event registered, then go ahead and return its result instead of processing all this stuff down. Here's what actually is doing the token processing in the old code. So I realised that, so I thought I'd have a bit of a go of that. So I went back into my own code, and above MVC here, because we want to do this, so I went app.use JWT bearer authentication. Oops, missed it. That's annoying. Start again. Okay. Cool. And then it's got those options that we can see in the old code. And then the options had those events. So I go new events, and then there was that event that was on message received. So there it is there, like it's sitting there ready to go. By being able to read the code, I was able to find this guy there. And so now all we need is something to pass into it. And rather than just straight up just put a message handle there or something like that, I figured we could use the opportunity to investigate a little bit around dependency injection in ASP.NET Core, and also setting up all those sorts of services. So once again, doing things in the correct way rather than doing a demo rushed way. And so I've actually brought in already another class up here, which actually has the ability to receive that message. So this guy here it's looking for a message received. It's looking for a function that returns a task that accepts a message received context. So in order to do that, we've got this guy up here. It's this JWT event-based. It's a horrible name for a class, I will admit. But it's got this on-message receive in here, and I'm going to step through this in a minute. But essentially, all I had to do, I didn't have to inherit off anything. It's just as long as I have the right signature, then this is going to go ahead and work. And I'm seeing a lot of this pattern showing up in ASP.NET Core at the moment. You just got to have the right signature for something as opposed to having to inherit. Because inheritance has a dependency on something that's in their code, whereas signatures seem to be a much more healthy way of doing things, and I really appreciate the pattern. But before we can go and consume this guy, I can't just create a new instance of it because its constructor is actually taking this iOptions. Now, iOptions in ASP.NET Core is a central theme for passing around configuration settings around the app. In the past, you sort of it was left up to you to decide how to pass configuration through things, but they've actually made it a central theme and included it as part of the service creation. So, the dependency injection setup and service configuration. And so, but I can't just create a new one of these guys because of that dependency. So I am going to actually have to register him for dependency injection to make sure that it's all sorted out. So if I go up here and into the configure services section, now this is the bit where we go ahead and make these services available things. So I can actually go services.add transient. So transient is add, every time a dependency is called, it's going to create a new one. There's a couple of others. There's add scoped, which is going to create a new one for every web request. So you can guarantee that the object's the same no matter where you get it from. But I'm going to go and get the I'm going to copy that. I'm going to try and type it. Okay. I'm going to register this guy. So I'm going to register this interface to be used by this guy here. As such. So now, whenever I request that somewhere in a dependency injected operation, I'm going to get that JWT event-based thing out. Now, it did have those settings that were being passed in. And so there's another type of, I guess, setup concept that you have in these services, and that is services.configure. And so it was of type signing settings. And then I can give it a section name, or sorry, I give it a configuration.get section, and it was called signing settings. Okay, so that's the second concept here, I guess, is the ability to configure from settings like that. Now, being a new project, I'm going to have to get those settings. So I'm just going to quickly copy them out of here. Definitely not going to type these by hand. Now, ASP.NET Core, we've got it's probably pretty hard to read, but we've got the app settings.json down there, which is a new concept. It's just JSON file, fairly flexible format. And by popping these guys in here, I've got the signing settings section, which I asked for from the configuration manager, and it contains the various configuration options that are then being used by the strongly typed validation endpoint, token valid issuer, and all those. They're actually being used by this strongly typed class here, signing settings. So you can actually, so the concept of settings being first class in this point is core to the system. Okay, so now I've just got I can actually inject that anywhere I want now. So I can actually go and get this guy and inject him anywhere. So I've got IJWT event-based response service. I can even inject it into the configure section. So I've only just set it up in configure services. It's already starting to work. So I can grab that guy, and because I'm injecting it, when it's constructed, it's going to automatically inject their settings as well. And if I modify it later and add more things, I don't have to change my code all around the place because the dependency injection system is going to look after that for me. And so now I should be able to just pop here service.onMessageReceived. And we've just injected into our pipeline a piece of middleware that's then got a custom callback out to our code, which is pretty, at the end of the day, for the complexity of what we're trying to do, that was actually pretty straightforward. So let's fire it up and just take the pulse and make sure it's still working. I'm going to put a breakpoint in here. I'm going to run it. Now, the first time it hits, it's going to be empty, the token, because we're just hitting straight from edge there. So if I just move the breakpoint down a bit there. It's trying to get the authorization header, and it's going to be empty. So that's fine. We'll just move over to Postman instead. I've actually grabbed the token and popped in an authorization header. And I've basically, when you're dealing with Json Web Tokens or other various tokens, you use the bearer authentication type and then just the token after it. No special encoding or anything like that. So in this case, though, I actually am passing through that in the authorization header. So now when we actually send into this guy, we should hit and we should actually see the token sitting there. So you probably can't read it, but anyway, it's there. And if I start stepping through this code, I strip off the bearer there, and I go in and I actually want to go and do the validation piece here. So it's going to just F10 over that quickly. Okay, just checking it's worked. So what's actually happened here is there's no code in here to actually validate the token. I've just farmed that out to something else. In this case, I've gone off to a particular URL, which is this endpoint, and apologies if you can't read it. What it is I've actually put the actual validation code up into an Azure function. And that allows me then to centralize and break apart even bits that in the past, I mean, that code would have just been in here. To update it, I would have to go around and update all my products. But now that I've farmed it out to an Azure function, I can now go and work on this further decentralized piece. So I'm going to go, let's go and have a look at that guy and see what's going on up there. Now, for those of you who don't know, Azure functions are basically these little tiny single-use, single responsibility pieces of code that run up in the cloud. They're basically centered around triggers. So you can trigger on various mechanisms, whether it's being when you write a file or when something comes in on an event service bus or on queues. Or another one that I'm using here is actually via webhooks. So you can actually fire them based on webhooks. So I'm saying, hey, can you please decode this payload and make sure it's good? I give it the key, the public key, of course, never the private one, and the values that I'm expecting, and it then returns whether or not it failed, or whether or not, or if it didn't fail, it returns the claims for me. So functions, they run in the Azure App Service. So the beauty of Azure App Service is, let's just say I create a new app service and it's got 4 servers or 2 servers or whatever. I can just scale it up and down as much as I want. I can actually install multiple different things on that same grouping of servers. It's not just for one site. So I can have staging, deployment, test 1, test 2 of one website, or I can have website 1, 2, 3 and all different deployment slots under them, as well as a bunch of these Azure functions and some other stuff as well. So you can actually share resources that you've created, cost saving, but also you guarantee that they're running on the same hardware. So when I say that I'm farming out this this token decoding piece to another system, it's not actually going very far. It should be just in the local cluster of servers. So it should be fast and also cheap. So I've got a few different types of function in here, but essentially this one here, what it is, these Azure functions, they're written in C# or Node. This one's in C#, and they're a special file type. They're a CSX, so they're not actually a full project. And CSX is basically got a few funny little syntactical things. You can include assemblies using the #r directive. So you see I'm including system.identityModel at the top. And basically, there's no class here. Not saying I'm not classy, but there's actually, as you can notice, that the first thing in the file is just this public async task. So under the hood, you can probably imagine that it's actually wrapping it up in something else as it builds it. Normally, you can edit these guys just in here and just try them out. But I've deployed this from GitHub, this one. But what you can do is down the bottom here is I can take this payload and just quickly run it into the guy to see how it works. So you can debug them up here and all that sort of thing. And once you get it working, you can take the code and deploy it up into another one via GitHub really easily. And so in this case, I can see that the results come back, and it's got this set of claims. It's a bit hard to read there. I might bring it out into Postman. Okay, so go plus there. There we go. So I can actually see the claims. So I've just sent up the token in this payload, and I can see the claims that have come back. So it's decoded them out. Now, if I go up into the header area up here, and I go and make a mod to this header, the body. So you see here, I'm going to go and edit that. Just going to remove one character and then try and send it. It's immediately invalidated it. it's been unable to decode the payload. So just one minor tiny change to that, and that crypto fails. So they can't be edited. So you might be able to see them, but you can't change them. And so I guess that's broken now. Probably not going to be able to remember what I removed, which is cool. We don't need it. So yeah, back to this one. I think this is where we're working. These Azure functions are pretty sweet, really. I've actually got one already that I've put in GitHub earlier. I just want to show you how quickly and easy it is to go and deploy one from GitHub. So I've created this new NDC function demo here. It's empty. It took about probably 30 seconds to a minute to actually create it and deploy it, but I figured that's a long time to stand here on stage doing nothing. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into the settings for this guy. I'm going to go set it up, and I'm going to set to deploy from GitHub. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to say, I'd like to deploy you from GitHub, please. And it's going to go and log in. I've already logged in, but if I wasn't, it would pop up the OAuth and authorization thing. I'm going to choose a project, JWT functions. That just listed all my projects. I'll show that again, sorry. That's just listing all the projects that are in my public GitHub. I've got a branch and everything like that. I'm just going to click OK. It's going to go set up the deployment source. Part of that, what it's actually doing is putting in a GitHub webhook. So when I actually go and check anything in, it's going to immediately synchronize that back to here. The thing is that these deployments run so quickly that by the time I've checked something in and come back, it's already rebuilt it. So if I go back over there now and refresh this guy, I might have to just go out and in again. I should be able to see my functions have been deployed already. With any luck. No luck. I'll have to go and make a change in GitHub probably. Anyway, that's how easy it is to actually link up continuous integration into stuff in Azure these days. So we've got that function running up there, and that's pretty much what's going on back here. Like I can see that same result has popped out here with that set of claims. Now, by having that function there, I can then call that my mobile app as well, and from any other app that I've got anywhere at all. But importantly, in that function, I could go off and check another data source to make sure that token hasn't been invalidated or something like that. So there's all sorts of other things that I can do in this other spot without having to even touch the rest of my products. The last thing on Azure Functions is that they do scale out. So if you run them in the non-app service-based mode, they'll auto-scale. Basically, you just pay per consumption and they'll scale out to the WUHA. If you're running them in the app service version, you're responsible for scale, but you can scale them out to as many servers as you want. So you can go really, really large with these things if you want to run them at scale. Okay, so I've got the result there. And I'll just hit continue. Back in Postman, just make sure that, oops, we're still going. Now this is interesting. I've just put in that pipeline and it's gone 200 OK. But if I go, oops, and cut that and send it in, it's still 200 OK. Over here it's probably hard to see. It's projected low quality, I guess you could say. So it's still saying 200 OK, even though I haven't passed any bearers in there. It's not, at the moment it's saying, nothing's actually saying, hey, these people need to actually be authorized or authenticated. Just because we've added stuff into that pipeline that's checking them and saying, yes, there's a user present, nothing's rejecting it and saying, hey, this user's no good, get them out of here. So what I'm going to do is go and tell it that these users actually really do need to be authenticated. So I'm going to grab another piece of code just quickly here, sorry. And back into Web Application 2. I'm going to go back into the startup. This is where everything happens. And up to the point where we actually configure how MVC works. So there's adding services.add MVC, it's adding a whole heap of default configuration data for MVC. I'm going to override it with some authentication stuff. So by pasting this in, just neaten that up a bit. There we go. By pasting this in, what I'm doing is I'm saying, use most of the default stuff, but I want to override some. So I'm creating a new authorization policy builder, which is going to require a claim of type ISS to be central auth host. So that's the issuer. So basically, I'm just making sure that the issuer is something. In when you're doing your project, you can have any claim dependency here for these types of authorization. And you can actually use different authorization policy builders for different things across your product. It's sort of, you don't have to have the same one on everything. You can have one controller using particular policies, and another controller could have a policy on it saying that the user has to be an administrator, and then you can put a claim in there saying administrator true. So there's all sorts of things that you can do. There's a lot of flexibility here. In this case, I'm just saying make sure that the central auth host claim is present. And then before we just had service at MVC, now I'm actually saying I want to do some configuration, please. If I hover over the little underscore here, I can see that that's actually an MVC options. So it's this cool pattern that they're doing, another new pattern they're doing in an ASP.NET Core that makes it really easy just using lambdas and lambdas to do callback. To make it really simple to go and get into configuration, actually start writing code instead of having to know how everything works. I didn't have to know that that was an MVC authentication option. I just typed it and it worked. Lowering the barrier of entry, I guess, to configuration here. And then before I add the authorise filter to the get method in the controller, this way I'm just going to add it to everything in the whole project. And this is the way I usually work, is I add it to everything, and then you can use the opt-out no authorise. It's like the inverter of it. So things that are open, like discovery, endpoints or login pages and things obviously need to be open. And so that's doing that. So now when we run it, it should be rejecting us. It should actually be saying, yeah, that's, we should be told to go away. So I'll send it. So there's 401 unauthorized. And then I'm just going to undo that. And then again, back to 200 OK now that I've actually passed in the right token. And let me just modify it, send it, and make sure we get the unauthorized. So I've just modified the token, and we've gone back to unauthorized. So it seems to be working OK. I'm just going to make sure that's working again just before I move off. Cool. All right, so, I mean, that's all interesting. But once again, we haven't really actually done anything with it other than say, yes, the user can get in. We haven't supplied anything to any developer to go and actually use this. So what I'm going to do now is put in our own piece of middleware that goes and collects this information and supplies it to supplies it to one of our own services, so getting into our own code that we can then go and use elsewhere in the product. And so adding custom middleware is really quite super easy as well. You can just add a new class. I'm going to call it my custom middleware. Now, middleware is a thing that runs in the OWIN pipeline. OWIN is a way to abstract, I guess, the concept of web server away from code. So it's a really great way to say, I need to be able to do all these web servery type things, but I don't know what web server I'm running on, and I don't care. So I could actually run this in iOS Express, or I can run it in Kestrel, although pretty much iOS Express is just proxying back to Kestrel. But if I was then to fire this up on another new web server that doesn't even exist yet, ASP.NET Core being cross-platform, I don't have to worry about it, because it knows that particular web server will know how to fire up the OWIN pipeline, as long as it knows how to do that. But when you actually write a custom piece of middleware, you can see the pattern coming in that these things sort of are chaining together. So you've got this, again, you don't have to have it based on anything as long as the signatures are correct, it will work. So I've taken in a request delegate there into the constructor. So that's obviously something that OWIN needs to be able to do. And then that's going to create that when the app boots for the first time. And then every time that something runs through the pipeline, it's going to call this guy, invoke, which accepts a HTTP context. And then I actually have to, as part of it being a good OWIN citizen, I have to actually make sure that I call next.invoke, passing in the context. So you can actually get a feel for what OWIN's doing there. It's come into me, and it's gone in, and I've called the next one. If I was to hover on that, I'm going to put this before the add MVC bit. That thing there's probably the MVC one that I'm actually calling. So it's all pulled apart. Like this this thing that's running hidden underneath the covers. You can see it clear as day, the way that pipeline's operating. I'm writing it here. It's pretty cool. It's really simple, I think. I mean, it's probably not at all underneath the hood, but... and so in here, though, because this is now my code, it's not some weird authentication piece running deep down in the OWIN pipeline, I can get out some claims. So I can go, oops, excuse me. I'm using the question marks there. For those of you who aren't familiar with C#6, that's null propagation. So by putting question mark dot, if user's null, it'll end there and return null, rather than trying to keep going through and then throw an exception because the thing before it was null. It's just a really nice way to check lots of things for null without having to have lots of ifs around them. But anyway, I've got the claims out, and so I need to do something with them. So what I've done is I've created a user service. So user service, basically what it is, it's got one method on it called setUpUser. It goes through the claims, it enumerates them looking for the name claim, and then it sets a local variable, a local non-static variable of name. Now this is important that it's not static, because we need to be able to share this around our app, but we need to make sure that it's only shared for the current request. Because there'll be no point. In memory, these guys are all running next to each other, right? We want to make sure that that when we do call this particular object back out of wherever, that we're getting the same object back, and that it's the right name. So I've got this user service, and I've already implemented iUserService on it, so you can probably guess where this is going. I'm going to go back to startup.cs, and I'm going to go up to configure services there. Yeah, there it is. Now this time, I've had to add transient before, which is going to create one each time. This time I'm going to do add scoped. And so scoped is going to go user service. There we go. Scoped is for this particular request. So now that guy is going to, whenever I request it, it's going to get the same instance for just this request. ASP.NET has provided me this really awesome scope that I can use to basically control what I get on every request. It makes it really simple to do it. So I'm going to go back into my new custom middleware, and I'm going to inject it here. Now, don't inject it on the top one, because that's created at the start. So it's obviously not going to be, this class isn't created for every request. It's created once, and then invokes called for every request. So I'm going to have to pass it in here. So this is dependency injection at work. And you start getting an idea, you get a feel for the pattern in ASP.NET Core that its signatures, as long as the signatures are okay, it's going to work, because you can see that it's using dependency injection to fire everything up. If this was on a base class of, middleware base class that I inherited off and I had to invoke, I cannot override that and then add more things that I need injected. So in this case, I'm able to just modify the signature with my user service, and then go await user service dot setup user claims. Okay, cool. So now the user service has got the claims, and this is where we pop out the end. I promised at the start we would see something that a junior developer could use. So I'm on my first day, and I'm saying, hey, just use the iUser service to go ahead and sorry, I meant to be in this other file. Stop it. Hey, go into the values controller and pop my name out, can you please? Just pop out the name of the current user. And the junior developer's going to go, how do I do that? And I'm like, well, you can try using the iUser service, because I've set it up for you. So you go here, I'm going to inject iUser service, and I'm going to make him local property, if it will allow me. I've lost all resharper. It's all right, I'll do it the old-fashioned way. I really am a junior developer, I'm not using resharper. So I've got the user service has been imported there, and then down here in the actual values, I can say name, because we've been seeing value 1 and 2, and then because it's a scoped thing, I can go under user service.name, and I know for a fact that that's the name that we set up through all that complexity. So everything that we just did just popped out this end as this 2 little line thing. and I'll just run it up so we can see that in operation. Okay, in Postman, and no. That's annoying. What did I do? Okay, might just put a breakpoint in the claim. Oh, you know what? If anyone can tell me what I didn't do, you win my, I don't know, I haven't got anything to give away actually.
You haven't added your custom filter, not filter, but
Middleware.
middleware.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I did every time I did a practice run, I did this wrong. So down in configure, I want to do it after the bare authentication because I'm using the claims. So I'm going to go app.use middleware, my custom middleware, and that's it. So after the bearer, but before MVC, because I'm using it in MVC, but I'm using claims. So you can see the order. If I go and put this before the use JWT bearer authentication, the claims will be empty because we've seen the way they call next, 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 right? So I run it up this time, and we should see the name pop out. Oh, breakpoint. I'm thinking, oh man, haven't had this one show up. So I can just check that the claims are there. Oh no, that's the browser version, sorry, just there. There we go. Let's check that the claims are there. And there's some claims, beautiful. They're going to get passed into the setup user here. It's checking for the claim, so it's got the first name there, so that's good. And now I've hit MVC. I can see that the name's Jordan Knight. It's probably too small to read, but trust me, it is. But when I get out to Postman over here, I can see the name's popped out as Jordan Knight. And that's it. It's simple once you do all the hard bits and tuck them away. And so that's the end of the demo, guys. I just wanted to pop up the slides again for 1 second there because we've got an Xbox One we're giving away. So if you want to go across to that URL, there's a brief survey, and basically we're asking you in 25 words or less what you'll do with IoT, and we're going to give that away on Friday. And so do encourage you to head across there to enter that if you want to take a photo of that or whatever. I know I went right up against time. Apologies for that. Sorry, I'll just leave it up there. But we might have a couple of seconds for some questions. If not, I'm going to go to the Ask Me Anything thingy after this, just outside. So if you want to come over there and ask any further in-depth questions, please pop out and say hello. I hope to see you guys around the conference, and thanks for coming along today, guys. Really appreciate it.